Hello and welcome to another video from Empire Eternal, where we journey into the rise and fall of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known. And if stories of ancient power, lost cities, sacred rituals, and empires carved into history speak to your imagination, take a moment to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because every new journey helps keep these forgotten worlds alive. Now imagine a city rising from the waters of a vast lake, its temples glowing red beneath the setting sun, its causeways stretching like stone veins across the valley, its markets roaring with thousands of voices, its priests watching the heavens for signs from gods who demanded blood, and its warriors marching beneath banners of feathers, obsidian, and gold. This was not a legend. This was Tenochtitlan, heart of the Aztec Empire, a place so astonishing that when European eyes first saw it, they compared it to a dream. But behind its beauty stood a darker question, one that still haunts history. How did a wandering people, once outsiders in a hostile land, build one of the most powerful empires in the Americas? And why did that empire, feared by millions, fall so suddenly when strangers arrived from across the sea? To understand the Aztec Empire, we must begin not with stone palaces or imperial armies, but with a journey through myth, hunger, exile, and prophecy. Long before they became rulers, the people we call the Aztecs called themselves the Mexica, and they told of a homeland somewhere far to the north, a place named Aztlan, shrouded in memory and sacred imagination. Whether Aztlan was a real place, a remembered migration, or a spiritual origin story, it became the foundation of their identity. The Mexica believed they had been chosen by Huitzilopochtli, the fierce hummingbird god of war and the sun, who commanded them to leave their homeland and search for a promised place. Their journey was long, brutal, and humiliating. They were not welcomed as conquerors. They were wanderers, strangers, people without land, often pushed away by stronger city-states already established in the Valley of Mexico. They served as mercenaries, accepted scraps of territory, and survived through endurance. The valley itself was already a world of cities, canals, temples, alliances, rival kings, and ancient traditions inherited from civilizations that had risen and vanished long before them, including Teotihuacan and the Toltecs, whose memory still towered over the imagination of Mesoamerica like the ruins of a vanished golden age. The Mexica entered this world as latecomers, but they carried something dangerous, a belief that destiny was not given but seized. According to their most famous legend, Huitzilopochtli told them to settle where they saw an eagle perched upon a cactus, devouring a serpent. There, on a marshy island in Lake Texcoco, surrounded by reeds, mud, and water, they saw the sign. To others, this island may have seemed useless, a swampy refuge fit only for the desperate. To the Mexica, it was the chosen center of the world. Around the year 1325, they founded Tenochtitlan, and from that unlikely island, an empire would rise. Yet the first miracle of the Aztecs was not conquest, but survival. They learned to turn water into land, mud into fertility, and isolation into protection. They built chinampas, floating agricultural fields that transformed the lake environment into one of the most productive farming systems in the world. They raised maize, beans, squash, chilies, tomatoes, and flowers in abundance. They drove wooden stakes into the shallow lake bed, layered mud and vegetation, and created artificial islands so fertile they could produce harvest after harvest. What began as necessity became genius. The lake that trapped them became the source of their strength. The island that seemed weak became a fortress, and Tenochtitlan began to grow, not as a village, but as a vision. At its center rose sacred precincts, temples, palaces, and ceremonial platforms. Causeways connected it to the mainland. Canals carried canoes through neighborhoods. Aqueducts brought fresh water. Markets filled with food, cloth, tools, pottery, cacao, feathers, jaguar skins, medicinal herbs, slaves, and precious stones. The city became alive with motion, a place where farmers, nobles, warriors, priests, merchants, artisans, and captives all moved within a system that was intensely ordered and deeply sacred. But before Tenochtitlan could command the valley, it had to survive the politics of stronger powers. For decades, the Mexica were subordinate to the city of Azcapotzalco, ruled by the Tepanecs, whose dominance spread across the region. The Mexica served, paid tribute, fought wars, and waited. Their rulers learned diplomacy and brutality in equal measure. Their warriors earned reputations for discipline and ferocity. Their nobles married into powerful families. Their priests strengthened the ideology that war was sacred, sacrifice was necessary, and the Mexica were chosen by the sun. But history often turns on moments when ambition meets crisis. In the early 15th century, Azcapotzalco fell into internal turmoil after the death of its ruler Tizozamoc. His successor, Maxla, moved against the Mexica and their allies, threatening their future. What could have been the end became the turning point. Under the leadership of Itzcoatl, the Mexica ruler, and the brilliant strategist Tenochtitlan forged an alliance with Texcoco and Tlacopan. This alliance, remembered as the Triple Alliance, defeated Azcapotzalco in 1428 and shattered Tepanec power. From that victory, the Aztec Empire was born. But it was not an empire like Rome, with provinces governed directly by imperial officials. It was a web of tribute, fear, alliances, intimidation, trade, ritual, and war. Cities were allowed to keep local rulers if they submitted, paid tribute, and acknowledged Aztec supremacy. Those who resisted faced devastation. Those who rebelled faced punishment. Those who obeyed sent cotton, maize, cacao, feathers, jade, gold, rubber, warriors' costumes, obsidian blades, women's garments, and human beings into the heart of Tenochtitlan. Tribute flowed inward like rivers, and with every delivery, the capital grew richer, grander, and more terrifying. Itzcoatl was more than a warrior king. His reign marked the rewriting of memory itself. Under his authority, and under the influence of Tlaquiel, old histories were said to have been reshaped or destroyed, and a new imperial story rose in their place, one that placed the Mexica at the center of cosmic destiny. Tlaquiel, though never emperor, may have been one of the most powerful figures in Aztec history. He helped shape the ideology that transformed the Mexica from survivors into sacred conquerors. He elevated Huitzilopochtli above many older gods, strengthened the ritual role of human sacrifice, and framed Aztec warfare as a cosmic obligation. In the Aztec vision, the universe was unstable. Previous worlds, or suns, had been created and destroyed. The current world survived only because the sun continued its journey across the sky, but that journey required nourishment. Blood was not merely violence, it was fuel for existence. Human hearts were offerings to keep darkness from swallowing the world. To modern eyes, this is horrifying, but to the Aztecs, sacrifice existed within a universe where gods themselves had sacrificed to create life. Humanity owed a debt, war paid that debt, empire organized the payment. This belief did not make sacrifice less brutal, but it reveals why it stood at the center of Aztec power. Religion and politics were not separate worlds. The temple was the state, the battlefield was a sacred field, the captive was both enemy and offering. And the emperor ruled not only as a king, but as a mediator between humans and gods. After Itzcoatl came Moctezuma I, one of the great architects of Aztec expansion. Under his rule, the empire pushed outward with discipline and ambition. Campaigns brought new cities under Aztec control. Tribute networks expanded. Tenochtitlan grew in wealth and ceremonial grandeur. Moctezuma I also strengthened institutions, organized legal codes, improved infrastructure, and reinforced social hierarchy. Aztec society was sharply ordered. At the top stood the Huitzilopochtli, the great speaker, chosen from the royal lineage by nobles. Beneath him were nobles, priests, warriors, judges, officials, merchants, artisans, farmers, laborers, and enslaved people. Yet Aztec society also offered paths of advancement, especially through war. A common man who captured enemies could rise in status, earn honors, wear special garments, and join elite warrior orders such as the Eagle Warriors and Jaguar Warriors. In this world, glory was not abstract, It was worn on the body in feathers, skins, shields, and ornaments. A warrior's achievements were visible, counted, remembered. Boys were trained from youth to endure pain, obey discipline, and serve the state. Girls were trained in household arts, weaving, ritual duties, and the moral expectations of family life. Education was widespread by Mesoamerican standards, with schools preparing noble children for priesthood and leadership, while commoners learned warfare, history, religion, and civic responsibility. The empire demanded much, but it also created identity. To be Mexica was to belong to a cosmic project. To fight was to participate in the survival of the sun. To die in battle or sacrifice was not necessarily disgrace. It could be a path to honor in the afterlife. Yet beneath this grandeur, the empire contained tension from the beginning, because every tribute demand created resentment. Every conquered city remembered its humiliation, and every sacrifice displayed the power of Tenochtitlan, while also deepening hatred among those forced to feed it. This contradiction would one day become fatal. Still, for more than a century, the Aztec world expanded. The rulers after Moctezuma I continued to build imperial prestige. Axayacatl campaigned fiercely, though he suffered a major setback against the Tarascan state to the west, one of the few powers able to resist Aztec expansion. That defeat mattered because it revealed that the empire was not invincible. The Tarascans possessed strong armies, fortified frontiers, and metalworking traditions, and the Aztecs could not simply absorb them. Even at the height of its strength, the empire had limits. Then came Tizoc, whose reign was shorter and less glorious, remembered by some traditions as less successful in war, though his name remains carved into monumental memory through the famous stone of Tizoc. After him rose Ahuitzotl, one of the most formidable Aztec rulers, whose reign brought expansion, wealth, and spectacle on a vast scale. Ahuitzotl pushed Aztec influence toward distant regions, securing tribute and prestige. He also oversaw major building projects, including expansions to the Templo Mayor, the great double temple at the heart of Tenochtitlan dedicated to Huitzilopochtli and Tlaloc, the rain god. The Templo Mayor was more than architecture, it was a mountain of meaning. One side evoked Coatepec, the mythical serpent mountain where Huitzilopochtli defeated his sister Coyolxauhqui and his enemies. The other evoked the sacred mountain of rain and fertility associated with Toloc. War and rain, blood and maize, sacrifice and life stood side by side in stone. During major ceremonies, captives climbed the temple steps, knowing that above them waited priests with obsidian blades. Drums thundered, incense rose, crowds gathered in the sacred precinct. The city itself became a theater of cosmic renewal. Hearts were lifted to the sun. Bodies descended the steps. To enemies, it was terror. To believers, it was necessity. To the empire, it was power made visible. But the Aztec relationship with sacrifice was not limited to the most dramatic rituals. Their calendar was filled with ceremonies honoring gods of rain, fertility, fire, maize, death, and renewal. Tlaloc required offerings for rain, and children were sometimes sacrificed in rituals meant to bring water to the fields, their tears believed to call rain from the heavens. Xipototec, the flayed god, symbolized agricultural renewal through the shedding of skin, like seed husks giving way to new life. Tezcatlipoca, mysterious lord of night, sorcery, destiny, and rulership, represented the unpredictable force that could raise or destroy kings. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, carried associations of wind, wisdom, priesthood, and creation, though his meaning shifted across regions and centuries. Mictlantecutli ruled the underworld, where many souls journeyed after death. Tonatiuh, the sun, demanded strength to continue his path. The Aztec pantheon was not a neat collection of characters, but a living system of forces, layered with older traditions, local cults, seasonal cycles, and imperial ideology. Their gods were beautiful and frightening, generous and hungry. They gave rain, maize, victory, birth, and time itself, but they demanded payment, and this religious worldview shaped the Aztec approach to war in ways that astonished outsiders. War was not only about killing enemies or seizing land, it was also about capturing living bodies. Aztec warriors often sought to wound, disable, and seize opponents rather than simply slaughter them. A captured enemy could bring honor to the warrior and become an offering to the gods. Some wars, known as flower wars, were fought against neighboring states, not always for immediate conquest, but for captives, military training, and ritual prestige. These wars also maintained tension with powerful enemies such as Tlaxcala, a confederation that resisted Aztec domination and remained independent in the shadow of empire. For generations, Tlaxcala endured pressure, encirclement, and hostility, but it did not fall. The Aztecs may have viewed this resistance as useful for ritual warfare, but in preserving a bitter enemy close to the heartland, they unknowingly left a blade pointed at their own empire. When the end came, that blade would be taken up by strangers. Before that final catastrophe, however, Tenochtitlan reached heights that seemed almost impossible. By the early 16th century, it may have been one of the largest cities in the world, with perhaps hundreds of thousands of inhabitants in the wider urban zone. Its order impressed even its conquerors. The great market of Tlatelolco, its sister city, drew tens of thousands of people. There were judges to regulate trade, officials to maintain order, and specialized merchants called pukter who traveled across long distances, carrying luxury goods and information. These merchants were more than traders. They could serve as spies, diplomats, and agents of imperial expansion. Through them, the Aztec world connected mountains, coasts, forests, and deserts. Goods moved across landscapes without horses, wheeled carts, or iron tools. Human porters carried burdens along roads and paths. Canoes moved through lakes and canals. Obsidian, sharper than steel at its edge, became knives, blades, and ritual instruments. Featherworkers created dazzling objects from quetzal plumes and tropical birds. Sculptors carved gods and calendars into stone. Scribes painted codices filled with tribute lists, genealogies, histories, and sacred knowledge. Astronomer priests watched cycles of the sun, Venus, and ritual calendars. Time itself was sacred, organized through interlocking calendars that guided ceremonies, agriculture, divination, and political legitimacy. The Aztecs did not see themselves as living in ordinary time. They lived inside cycles of creation and destruction, always aware that worlds could end. Perhaps this is why their civilization feels so intense, so urgent, so filled with beauty and dread. Every temple, every battle, every ritual feast, every offering of blood belonged to the effort to hold the universe together. Yet there was another side to Aztec achievement, one often overshadowed by the spectacle of war and sacrifice, the daily intelligence of urban life. Tenochtitlan required planning, sanitation, water management, food distribution, and social organization. Causeways had removable bridges for defense and canoe traffic. Dikes helped separate fresh and brackish water. Aqueducts delivered clean water from springs. The city's neighborhoods, or kalpali, organized families, labor, landholding, and local religious life. Farmers rose before dawn. Women ground maize on stone mitates, transforming kernels into tortillas and tamales. Children learned songs, discipline, and duties. Priests fasted, bled themselves, and kept rituals moving. Nobles debated politics in palaces. Messengers ran across the empire carrying news. Artisans worked gold, stone, wood, shell, and feathers. The empire was not only a machine of conquest, it was a world of families, markets, jokes, songs, grief, ambition, and prayer. And that is what makes its fall so devastating. It was not the fall of an abstract empire. It was the collapse of a living world. The ruler who stood at the edge of that collapse was Moctezuma Tican, often remembered in Spanish sources as Montezuma. He came to power in 1502, after Ahuitzotl, inheriting an empire rich, feared, and unstable. Moctezuma Tican was a ruler of ceremony and authority, deeply connected to priestly power and imperial grandeur. He strengthened noble privilege, demanded respect, and projected majesty. Under him, Tenochtitlan shone like the center of the world. But beyond the lakes and temples, pressure was building. Tribute burdens weighed heavily on subject peoples. Enemies waited for opportunity. Omens were later said to have appeared, fires in the sky, strange lights, weeping women, temples struck by flame, birds with mirrors in their heads, monstrous beings, unsettling signs that the world was shifting. Some of these stories may have been shaped after the conquest, but they reveal how deeply the fall was remembered as cosmic rupture. Then, in 1519, ships appeared on the eastern coast. They carried men from a world the Aztecs did not know, men hardened by war, ambition, disease, and the hunger for gold and glory. Their leader was Hernán Cortés, a Spanish conquistador who had defied authority in Cuba to launch his expedition into Mexico. With him came steel swords, crossbows, muskets, cannon, horses, war dogs, Christian symbols, interpreters, and invisible killers in the form of old-world diseases to which indigenous peoples had no immunity. But Cortés did not conquer the Aztec Empire with a handful of Spaniards alone. That myth hides the deeper truth. The empire fell because its enemies, long oppressed or threatened by Aztec power, saw in the newcomers a chance to destroy Tenochtitlan. The Spanish arrival did not create Aztec weakness, it exploited it. At first, Cortés moved carefully through a world of rival states and complex diplomacy. One of the most important figures in the story was Malintzin, also known as Malinche or Doña Marina, an indigenous woman given to the Spaniards who became Cortés's interpreter, advisor, and cultural mediator. Her role was enormous and controversial, later remembered through layers of blame, symbolism, and myth. She understood languages, politics, and the dangerous spaces between worlds. Through her voice, alliances were negotiated, threats delivered, and misunderstandings transformed into strategy. Cortés soon encountered the Tlacoans, fierce enemies of the Aztecs. After fighting the Spaniards, the Tlacoans chose alliance. This decision changed history. They knew the empire. They knew its roads, enemies, tactics, and weaknesses. They provided warriors in numbers the Spaniards never could have supplied. With Tlaxcala beside him, Cortés became not merely an invader, but the spark in a landscape already soaked with resentment. As he marched inland, tension deepened. At Cholula, a sacred city allied with the Aztecs, Spanish and Tlaxcalan forces carried out a massacre after Cortés claimed to have discovered a plot against them. Blood filled a holy city. The message traveled ahead. The strangers were dangerous, unpredictable, and willing to annihilate. Moctezuma faced an impossible dilemma. Should he crush them before they reached the capital, or receive them as guests and study them? Were they envoys, enemies, gods, or men? The idea that the Aztecs universally believed Cortés was the god Quetzalcoatl is now treated with caution by many historians, because it may have been exaggerated or shaped by later accounts. But uncertainty itself was real. The Spaniards were unlike anything the Mexica had faced. Mounted men who seemed fused with animals, weapons that thundered, metal armor shining in the sun, and a strange confidence that came from another world. In November 1519, Cortés entered Tenochtitlan. Imagine that moment. Spaniards and Tlaxcalans crossing the causeways over Lake Texcoco, staring at towers, temples, gardens, canals, and crowds beyond anything they had expected. Moctezuma came out to meet them, surrounded by nobles, clothed in splendor, moving with ritual dignity. Two worlds looked at each other across a fragile bridge of ceremony. For a moment, history held its breath. Cortés and his men were welcomed into the city, housed in a palace, shown wonders, and treated with formal honor. But beneath the gifts and speeches, both sides measured danger. The Spaniards were deep inside the capital, surrounded by thousands who could destroy them. The Aztec ruler had admitted a foreign force into the heart of the empire. The tension could not hold. Cortés seized Moctezuma, taking the emperor hostage inside his own city. It was an act of breathtaking audacity, and for a time it worked. Orders could be issued through the captive ruler. Treasure could be gathered. Spanish fear could be masked as control. But an empire cannot be ruled forever through a humiliated king. The people of Tenochtitlan watched, angry and confused, as their sacred ruler appeared constrained by foreigners. Then Cortés was forced to leave the city to confront a Spanish expedition sent to arrest him. While he was away, his lieutenant Pedro de Alvarado ordered a massacre during a religious festival in Tenochtitlan, killing unarmed nobles and celebrants. The city erupted. When Cortés returned, he found not a subdued capital, but a volcano. Fighting filled the streets. Moctezuma, brought out to speak to his people, failed to calm them. Soon he was dead, under circumstances still debated, remembered differently by Spanish and indigenous accounts. Whether killed by his own people's stones, Spanish violence, or the chaos of imprisonment, his death symbolized the breaking of the imperial order. The Spaniards and their allies attempted to flee the city under cover of darkness on June 30, 1520. Burdened with stolen gold, they crossed the causeways, while Aztec warriors attacked from canoes and rooftops. Bridges were broken, horses stumbled, men drowned in the lake, dragged down by armor and treasure. The night became known to the Spanish as La Noche Triste, the night of sorrows. But for the people of Tenochtitlan, it was a moment of fierce resistance. The invaders had been driven out. The empire had survived, or so it seemed, because unseen disaster was already moving through the population. Smallpox, carried from the Old World, spread with devastating force. It killed warriors, nobles, priests, children, mothers, farmers, and rulers. Among its victims was Cuitlahuac, who had succeeded Moctezuma and led resistance after the Spaniards' expulsion. Disease did what armies could not easily do. It shattered households, weakened defenses, broke morale, and created terror beyond explanation. The Aztecs had gods for disease and healing, rituals for crisis, and traditions for endurance, but smallpox was a catastrophe from beyond their biological experience. While Tenochtitlan suffered, Cortés rebuilt his strength in Tlaxcala. He did not return alone. He came with Spanish survivors, tens of thousands of indigenous allies, ships built in pieces and carried to the lake, and a strategy to strangle the capital. The final siege of Tenochtitlan in 1521 was one of the most brutal episodes in the history of the Americas. The city that had risen from the lake would now be destroyed through the lake. Spanish brigantines attacked canoes and controlled the waters. Causeways became killing grounds. Allied armies cut off supplies. Aqueducts were destroyed. Hunger spread. Disease lingered. Street by street, canal by canal, house by house, the defenders fought under their final ruler, Cuauhtémoc, young, determined, and trapped inside a dying city. The siege was not a simple clash between Spaniards and Aztecs. It was a war involving vast numbers of indigenous warriors on both sides, especially those allied with Spain against Mexica domination. This truth matters because it reveals the empire's fatal vulnerability. Power built on tribute and fear can command obedience, but in crisis it may not inspire loyalty. Many subject peoples did not fight to save Tenochtitlan. Some fought to see it burn. Yet even as starvation consumed them, the defenders resisted with extraordinary courage. They repaired breaches. They launched attacks from ruins. They refused easy surrender. The sacred city became a landscape of smoke, corpses, broken walls, and contaminated canals. The great temples that had once towered above imperial ceremonies now watched over suffering. The marketplace emptied. The songs faded. Families hid among ruins. Warriors fought without hope because honor demanded it, because their gods demanded it, because their world had nowhere else to go. On August 13, 1521, Cuauhtémoc was captured while trying to flee across the lake. The resistance ended. Tenochtitlan had fallen. The Aztec Empire, as an imperial power, was broken, but the fall did not mean disappearance. The Spanish built Mexico City atop the ruins of Tenochtitlan, using stones from temples to raise churches and colonial buildings. The sacred precinct was buried, but not erased. Under the streets of the modern city, the old capital remained, waiting. Indigenous survivors adapted, resisted, converted, remembered, concealed, and transformed. Nahuatl continued to be spoken. Traditions survived in food, language, agriculture, place names, ceremonies, and memory. The conquerors tried to impose a new world, but the old one did not vanish. It flowed beneath the new one, like water beneath stone. The legacy of the Aztec Empire is therefore not only a story of sacrifice and conquest, it is a story of human brilliance and human terror living side by side. It asks us to hold contradictions, a civilization capable of extraordinary urban planning and devastating warfare, poetic beauty and ritual violence, social order and imperial oppression, cosmic imagination and political ambition. The Aztecs were neither monsters nor saints. They were people living inside a universe of meanings very different from our own, making choices shaped by fear, faith, hunger, pride, and power. Their empire rose because the Mexica turned exile into identity, swamp into city, warfare into ideology, and tribute into imperial wealth. It fell because the same system that made it powerful also made enemies everywhere, and when disease, foreign invasion, and indigenous resistance converged, even the great city of the lake could not withstand the storm. Yet look at Mexico today, and the eagle on the cactus still endures as a national symbol. The image born from Mexica legend now stands at the heart of modern identity. The ruins of the Templo Mayor stand beside a cathedral. Nahuatl words live in global languages through chocolate, tomato, avocado, chili, and coyote. The Chinampa landscapes still survive in places like Xochimilco, echoes of an agricultural genius that fed a metropolis. The memory of Cuauhtémoc remains a symbol of resistance. The name Tenochtitlan still carries the weight of wonder. And beneath Mexico City, beneath traffic, plazas, churches, government buildings, and crowded streets, the old stones remain. They remind us that empires do not die in a single moment. They break, transform, and become part of the world that follows. The Aztec Empire was born from prophecy, raised by war, fed by tribute, sanctified by blood, and destroyed by a collision of worlds. But its story still speaks because it is not only about the past. It is about the price of power, the danger of fear, the strength of belief, and the fragile beauty of civilizations that believe they will last forever. In the end, the lake city fell silent, the drums stopped, and the smoke lifted over ruins where temples had once touched the sky. But history did not forget. The empire of the Mexica still stands in memory, not as a simple tale of gods, war, and sacrifice, but as one of the most dramatic reminders that human beings can build wonders from impossible places, and that even the brightest cities can cast the darkest shadows.